Earth Mother, please send me.
Okay, we are now live. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wilderness Torah Shmita Slowdown series. And thank you for joining us. In this series, we're exploring the power of Shmita through live conversations with changemakers across the Jewish world. Shmita, which means release in Hebrew, is the last year of the 7-year cycle when the Jewish people are instructed to release land, debt, and those in servitude. Today, this is a cultural opportunity to rest, renew, and transform. And here at Wilderness Torah, we are using the Shmita year to take stock, clarify our purpose, and plan for building the Center for Earth-Based Judaism. And you can learn more about the Center for Earth-Based Judaism at wildernesstorah.org/CEBJ. So we are thrilled to host the Shmita Slowdown series as a way to share diverse voices and perspectives. And my name is Hallie. I'm the marketing manager at Wilderness Torah. And I'm so thrilled to welcome today's featured guest, Rabbi Adina Allen. She's the co-founder and creative director of Jewish Studio Project in Berkeley, California. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her on. Okay, stand by. I think she should be joining any second now. Let's see if that works. Oh, there you are. Hello, Adina.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. So
So I have a little introduction that I would like to give for you. So everyone, this is Rabbi Adina Allen. She is a spiritual leader, writer, and educator who believes that creativity exists within each and every one of us, regardless of perceived skill or talent, and that creativity is a vital resource in the work of social change. Dina is the co-founder, as I shared before, of Jewish Studio Project, a nationally recognized Jewish learning organization that brings together practices from the beit midrash, House of Jewish Study, with a powerful approach from the field of art therapy. Adina has taught at hundreds of Jewish institutions around the country and has helped thousands of Jewish educators, clergy, teens, young adult professionals, and lay leaders reclaim their creativity as a powerful, relevant, and transformative tool. So Rabbi Adina Allen, so glad to have you today. And I would love to just invite you to share a little bit about the work that you do and what the Jewish Studio Project is all about.
sure. Thanks. Great to be here. Nice to see you, Hallie. It's been a while.
I know.
And one thing I'll share that's similar to Wilderness Torah, JSP is in our 7th year, and we just went through a 9-month strategic planning process. So also use this time and this really, all the possibilities within the year of Shemitah as a way to kind of step back from the work that we have been doing, to look back on what's been and to vision what could be next. So just emerged with our new strategic plan, which I feel really excited about, and sort of a clarified mission and vision. And like you said, we envision a world in which all people are connected to their inherent creativity. And we offer creativity as a Jewish practice for spiritual connection and for social transformation. So I want to talk, hopefully we can get to talk a little bit about that and how creativity might relate to Shemitah.
Yeah, I love that so much because as someone who's an artist, like I light up when I hear that, you're bringing that to the Jewish lens, and I don't think there's a lot of organizations really doing what you guys are doing. So it's really cool what you guys bring to the table. And that's also why I thought to bring you on this episode, because what better way to practice rest and renewal and transformation than through art? So would you share with the audience a little bit about, what does Shmita mean to you, and how does that play into what you teach?
Totally, yeah. And want to share that I really came into this work of creativity and Jewish Studio Project through the Jewish environmental world. So there's a lot of synergy and overlap there. And after college, I did one of the earliest seasons of Adama on the East Coast at Isabella Friedman and was a part of the early days of Wilderness Torah. So I think as someone who at one point tended to the land and seeded and planted and was really connected in that way, I can really see the glimmers of possibility that Shmita has for us in terms of how we relate to the land as this antidote to overconsumption and to endless production and growth and to working everything, including ourselves, the land, everything around us down to the bone. And I have this question about, Shmita as a widely practiced phenomenon in our day feels a little bit far off from where we are now, right? To have a year where we really don't harvest or tend to the land in that kind of way. So the questions are like, how do we do this? And where will our food come from? I'm sure these are questions that y'all at Wilderness Torah are asking. And how will we survive economically given the way the world is set up today? And so, yes, Torah gives us this incredibly beautiful, liberatory, anti-capitalist practice. And then the question is, okay, how do we come from where we are in our actual lives right now? How do we get ever closer towards that vision? And how do we get to Shmita as a practice that can support regeneration and the ongoing cycle of life? And so I guess from where I stand and from my work at Jewish Studio Project, the way I have been connecting to Shmita is how can this practice be a way of rewilding our imagination? I think Shmita offers an incredibly different version of the world, and how do we sort of unlock or untether ourselves from the world as it is and what we see here to be able to create that world that we dream of, that world that we envision, that world where the fields, the gates around our fields are open and everyone can come and eat from it. And we have a year of just resting our bodies and our minds and our spirits and seeing what naturally proliferates on the land, and how do plants work with each other and grow around each other when we're not forcing them into certain rows and certain times of blooming, and what can we learn and how can that regenerate and nourish our souls. So I'm thinking about how can this year be a year of tending to the wilds of our imagination and letting that really flourish for what is the world that we dream of.
I love that so much. It's kind of like a metaphor that can translate from not just talking about the land, but also talking about our mind and our body and our spirit. And then, what's possible? We don't know, because when we're always producing, we're always moving, we're always doing things, we're working within the structures that have already been built. We don't pause to think like, what else is possible? So I love that metaphor of like the imagination kind of being like the land, and we really need that opportunity to like rewild our own imagination and our own creativity during this time, so that it can be, even if you're not a farmer or, have any relation to land, you can still kind of apply it to a very practical way of life and how we can create, basically.
100%. And when you were just talking and saying that so beautifully, I was thinking about this midrash, this rabbinic commentary that talks about how we all stood at Sinai and that God was like a picture visible from all angles, and that we were all able to see it from our own vantage point and it gazed back on all of us. And so thinking about how we each, I think, not just revelation, but a piece of the puzzle of like what is a sustainable, connected, liberatory future going to look like. We all have a piece or maybe many pieces of that puzzle, but it's going to take all of us. And so how can each of us be in this practice of, tending to the imagination? That's like a skill, it's a practice, and it's not necessarily something that we're taught. It's not necessarily something that's nurtured in society, I think, because it's really radical, right? When we really let our imagination unfurl, it's like, wow, what could, all the possibilities exist. We're in that place of all possibility. So it's radical and it'll take down the structures that we see around us today. But we each have a piece of that puzzle. So in my work, I think about how can every person, whether we consider ourselves creative or not, or imaginative or not, we all have that capacity in us. And how can we tap in and get that piece of the puzzle so that we can co-create the future that we all seek?
I love that so much. And I like, as you were speaking too, I was thinking about how that can be like a really scary process also, because you're like stepping into this mystery. Like when we know everything, we know what step we're taking next, we've got it all planned out, it feels safer. But to take a step back and be like, okay, there's this great mystery. We don't really know, but we want to open to the possibility and dream. Um, anything is possible, but it can also be quite scary as well, I feel.
100%. It's both, I think, scary. It's very vulnerable, right? To ask ourselves, like, what does our deepest heart desire? I think so many folks that I talk to these days, it's like, well, sure, there's like a glimmer of like that thing that I desire or dream of or can envision. And then this immediate shutting down of the self of like, well, that's not possible or that couldn't happen for good reason too. A lot of us have been disappointed around like our vision and then reality coming to meet and, squash that vision. But I think the more we can, be tender to our own hearts and tender to each other's hearts and help create, safe and places of community where we can dream and vision together, the more that can like slowly become possible and we can get more bold and courageous and connected in bringing those visions out into the world.
I love that so much. It's an opportunity for personal growth, I feel, as well. And that's what I think is amazing about the community that you've created and what we have at Wilderness Tour, because when you do this in community, you also are supported by other people who are in that same process, and little by little we can have a greater impact. And that brings me to kind of my next question, which is like, what do we as individuals, how can we embrace the Shemitah? If we can't, get together with community, or, how can we embrace it in little ways?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I think it does start with these little ways that will lead into the bigger ways. One of our phrases at Jewish Studio Project when we're working with visual art materials, we say, just start by making marks on the page. Just start with marks on the page and then let that lead you to the next mark, to the next, to the next. So I think about that with Shemitah too. Let's start with just like, what can we do in this moment and how can that grow on itself? So I think part of it is just a question of like, what are we being asked in our own lives to release, right? The word Shemitah means release. What is being asked to be let go? And can we get practiced in that art of letting drop, letting be let go? How can we, in small or big ways, move away from systems of control and domination and extraction? So just asking these questions and kind of seeing where they take us. I've been using this Shemitah year to go on hikes. I try to do a hike almost every day up in the Claremont Canyon, for those of you who are local. And just noticing, sort of like I was saying before, like what wildflowers are proliferating and in what time and what pollinators are attracted to them, and just sort of noticing the land around us and all of the dynamic and creative relationships that are happening, the ones we can't see that are happening on our skin and within our own cells with all the bacteria and microbiome that we have, but also around us, that we sort of reweaving ourselves into our landscape, and are reminding ourselves that we are not alone and that we are not separate, especially in these years of, I think, so many of us feeling so alone with the pandemic, but that we are intimately and inextricably woven into and connected to our landscape. And so sort of weaving those threads of connection. That's one thing.
Yeah, I love that. There's a certain responsibility, I think, that with Shemitah too. It's like, okay, like I'm just kind of going off of what popped into my head, but it's like, if God gave us like this, commanded us to like take this day, this year of like letting the land fallow, because we take so much, we take and we take and we take, and so like taking a moment to like step back and remember, like, this is a relationship, and there's that we have a responsibility to our home, this earth, and we have this like really deep connection, and we're here also to like observe and love and connect and respond and receive. So doing like a small hike or something and just taking a moment to really like just relax into that and just realize that interconnection. and then recognizing like we have this responsibility because we are in relationship to all the living things in this universe. That's kind of what popped into my head when you said that.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, the responsibility and the blessing. I think so often, we can feel we go to the harder place of responsibility, and then we can be like, oh, it's too much for me. I feel responsible, and there's too much for me to do. And so I think if we can hold exactly what you're saying, the responsibility together with the incredible blessing, and it doesn't even have to be a hike, right? You can lay on your couch and open the window and hear the birds, certainly in Berkeley right now, the birds chirping outside or the hummingbird flying by, and just be reminded that this too, we are a part of this too. We are not separate from this.
Mm, I love that. And what about like creativity? Like what, I know you mentioned like getting out into nature. What can we do, to tap into our creativity if we're at home or, want to
Yeah.
feeling like we haven't really touched that part of our lives so
Yeah.
much?
I'll say a couple things about creativity and Shmita, and then, come to DSP. It's online, it's open and free, and welcome everyone, most of our programs. So would love to have you. But I was thinking about how amazing creativity and the creative process is as a teacher connected to these themes of Shmita, that part of the teaching of Shmita, right, is that the land is not ours. Ultimately, the land is God, right? Is God's. Everything is God's, the divine creative source, however we want to understand that. And the creative process is such an incredible teacher of this. You often hear people who have written a song who wouldn't say oh, I wrote that song. You might say that song came through me. And I think that the truth of the creative process, at least in my theological view, and my felt experience and my body of it, that when we are creating, we are acting as a vessel through which source can move through us and to us and onto the page or onto the stage or whatever it is, whatever creative modality we're working with. And so ultimately what we create also is not ours, right? It's almost like a souvenir or like the breadcrumbs on the trail of that have been left behind from our encounter with source, with the divine. And so I love that Shmita and creative process both have this in common of ultimately none of this is ours or ours alone. And I've been thinking also about, Rambam has this instruction to, break down, let things proliferate beyond the fences, beyond these borders or these boundaries that we have put up. And so just thinking about what about an exercise in just creating lines, creating these boundaries on the page for yourself and just letting yourselves move outside the lines. A really simple exercise and just seeing what does that bring up for you? Boundaries are extremely important, and seeing what comes up for us when there's a time in which we move beyond those and seeing what happens. I'm also thinking about Shmita is such a teaching of abundance, right? Ultimately, a place where we're really doing Shmita with the land. It's okay, when we do it correctly, there's enough food for everyone. We don't have to worry, right? We're not starving. We've planned enough so that there is bounty and abundance. And so I've been thinking about this year with just art materials of where is there abundance all around us? I'm out with my kids on a walk and we're just using, leaves and acorns and things that have fallen on the ground and arranging them, or saving your junk mail and your boxes, your cereal boxes, and cutting them up and saying anything can be turned into an art material. And so how do we find abundance with what, there's always abundance in something that we have. And so rediscovering that.
I love that so much because I think sometimes people think oh, well, if I want to make art or do something creative, I need to have the art supplies. I need to go to the art store. I need to do everything, and maybe you already have what you need around.
Yes.
And you can just have fun with that and start there.
100%. And we think a lot about creative constraints that sometimes when you have you've bought every, fancy supply, there's almost such a pressure on that. It becomes so precious. There can be such a pressure. So yeah, just imagine you already have what you need, what's there, and how can you turn it and see these materials in a different way of oh, actually I could use this ballpoint pen and this scrap paper and make something incredible.
I
And
love that.
Yeah, those constraints can, yeah.
So I would love to know, what, from your viewpoint, from kind of how you see the world connected with art and imagination and Judaism, what's one big change that you would love to see in the coming world out of Shmita?
Yeah, wow, that's a big question.
I know.
I don't even know. I want to be surprised because I don't have all the answers. I just have a small piece. And so what I want to continue to be like surprised and delighted and amazed by the different learnings that are coming through all the different parts of our community right now in terms of what people are gleaning and finding and discovering during the Shemitah year. Like I said, it really does take all of us from our unique life experiences and vantage points. I want to see us tending to the tenderness of our hearts and letting ourselves really nourish our visions, our dreams, our imagination, both for ourselves and our own lives and what they can be, and also for our collective life as a people, and not saying like, oh, that's too far off, or oh, that's too, impossible, we'll never get there, but really giving ourselves a chance and helping support each other and tending to those dreams.
I love that. It's like, I feel like sometimes, we have these dreams when we're like little kids, when our imaginations are free and wild, and then slowly we get caught up in life and we forget that that was a dream, but it's still always like kind of whispering in the back of your mind. And I love the idea that, like during Shemitah, we can take a step back and really, meditate and listen and be reminded that that dream is still alive inside of us. And like I have this dream that I would love to like build a community and live on the land. And I know so many other people who also have that dream. And it's like, well, we need to talk about that, and we need to really validate that, even though it seems so far from like my current reality living, in the urban world. But just validating that you have those dreams and remembering and listening for what that is. Because also that happens on a grand scale, and if we all kind of tap into that together, we can find a new kind of collective dream.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that you brought up like childhood and being a kid, because that's something we think a lot about with creativity too, right? Often, for many of us, if we were lucky enough to have art in our childhood, we got to like draw and paint and sprawl, and it was all fine until we were, I don't know, sometimes at a really young age, started being told like, oh, that's not good, or it's not being hung up on the wall, or somewhat, And so how can we go back to those early childhood places where like, maybe we had a sense of all possibility? And I love what you just said about like each other's dreams and visions. So thinking about how can this be a year where we're reading, where we're listening, where we're opening up possibilities beyond what we ourselves ever could have imagined, learning from others who may be really different from us about what their dreams and visions are and where that might touch us. I'm also thinking about like letting the last 6 years, that Shemitah can be a time to let the previous years sort of like compost and mulch down and get turned over and broken down within us, so that the seeds of what comes through during Shemitah can be planted and have a chance to grow. So sort of a mulching and breaking down process, I think, is important too.
I just love those metaphors that you use, because it's like when you connect it, when you use the metaphor of like, composting, that you think like, oh, that's what the earth does naturally. But then we, from the perspective of being a human being, we can also, we also compost away memories and experiences, and from that can birth, through this Shemitah year, can birth something that is beautiful and new. So I love when you connect in that metaphor. Well, I would love to give you, well, if the audience has any questions, I've seen we've had people come in and out. If the audience has any questions, feel free to type them in the chat. And I also would love to give you, Rabbi Adina, a chance to talk about any programs that you have coming up that people might be able to plug into.
Oh, that's so nice. Well, I will just share, we have a couple ongoing community programs that are open to everyone and free of charge. One of them is called Have You Made Art About It Yet? Which is the foundational, which is a question my mom, who's an artist and art therapist and whose work, a lot of Jewish Studio Project's work is based on, asked me as a child when I was facing problems, she would say, have you made art about it yet? And so that's the question we are asking ourselves and asking each other as community every month. And each month it's centered around the Jewish calendrical cycle. So Passover, Purim, sort of the holidays and the seasons that we're in. And it's an incredible community of people across the country and really across the world, and would love to have folks join. The next session is in April around Passover. And we have ongoing Torah study bi-weekly called Creative Commentary, where we start with sort of a mini service of just like singing and dropping into shared resonance. And we move into an exploration of some aspect of the weekly Torah portion, and then into a creative writing experience where we sort of harvest our own ideas and insights and tap into the prophetic imagination for ourselves. And this Sunday, we're doing something called Have You Half Day, which is a deep dive into JSP's creative process and methodology. And it's on preparing for Passover, on liberating our creativity. And that's this Sunday. So those are a couple of things folks can plug into.
Awesome. And so where should they go to find you?
Go to our
yeah.
or our Instagram, Jewish Studio Project. And yeah, open to love anyone to be there who feels so called.
Amazing. And do you guys do anything virtually, or is everything based in the Bay Area right now?
Everything's virtual. So all of those are, and yeah, everything's virtual.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I do want to let the audience know as well that we have, of course, we are enrolling folks in as well at Wilderness Torah. It's called Introduction to Earth-Based Judaism. And it's a 7-week course with a lot of really amazing teachers. And you get to dive into the really the pillars of what Earth-Based Judaism is. There's exercises. It's a personal growth experience, as well as learning about the Torah of Earth-Based Judaism. So that is open for enrollment right now as well. And I think, I didn't see any comments, but I did see a lot of people tuning in and out. So thank you everyone for joining us. And if you want to learn more about the Shmita Slowdown work that Wilderness Torah is doing, you can definitely go to our website at wildernesstorah.org/Shmita Slowdown. And we will be back in 2 weeks with the next episode. So it might be here on Instagram, or it might be on Facebook Live. But you will be hearing from us. So thank you so much, Rabbi Adina. It was so great to have you.
Hallie, it was so great to be with you. And I just want to say our 2 young kids are in Wilderness Torah's bechutz right now. And so just loving all the learning of Wilderness Torah coming into our family. So lots of love to you and the Wilderness Torah crew.
Yay. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.